This is the lore of the 1st Battalion. In the earliest days of civilization in Mesopotamia, there was a leader of a band of warriors that would defend their livelihood against the neighbouring tribal groups that envied their resources and agriculture. Little did they know they would be the first military group to organise and fight for something bigger than themselves. "You're crazy, Gaius!" as Scipio pressed him to reconsider his crazy reforms. "If you do this, not only will you lose the nobles, but the common people as well." Gaius Marius looked over his parchment that would declare the new reforms in the Roman army. "They deserve better, Scipio. Ranks will never be respected if they are filled by blood rather than sweat. The barbarians are threatening our borders every single day. There's only so much plunder to go around. No, we start immediately." "Which group would you like to reform?" Scipio spat. Gaius looked down at his pile of parchments on his desk and focused on the volunteer list. How about the first 1,000 of volunteers? The year is 1704, and the Queen of England is nervously looking at the situation in Europe and hoping for a miracle in sustaining her empire from foreign threats. Then, the commander of the British military forces walks in with confidence in his stride and proclaims to the Queen, "I have an idea." Franklin D. Roosevelt is sweating in front of his war table after reading the newspaper column on his declaration of war to Japan in response to the attack on Pearl Harbor. He suddenly jolts when Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower marches into the room and announces, "The 1st Battalion is ready." Ben puts down his European great-grandfather's World War I pictures back in the box, along with his American grandfather's World War II memorabilia. He pushes up his cheap, broken glasses as he tries to put back his family legacy on the shelf in the attic. As he goes back to his room, he tries to fix his frames as he recounts the vicious bullies at his school. He tenderly touches the bruises on his ribs that were hidden from his mum thanks to his aggressors. As he carefully sat down on his affordable, custom-built PC, he noticed a Steam notification about the summer sale. He scrolls through it, ignoring the countless games he had already bought but never found the experience or friends he was hoping for. Ben stops suddenly and leans closer as he readjusts his crooked frames. Hold fast. Nations at war. Ben looked at the discount price more than the actual game, and he had just got his pitiful allowance from his mum because of the ex-husband she chose. Without thinking twice, Ben bought, downloaded, and jumped right into the game. Already trying to figure out how to mute people, Ben had a couple of needed laughs from the memes and joyful, carefree gameplay he wasn't used to. He played the flag bearer and drummer while screaming the new war cries in different languages. For once, he wasn't scared about his well-being, but confident in his own self-esteem. He was elated and started playing the whole weekend. Then, one match, he noticed the screams had died down. The only noise was coming from the game itself, so Ben double-checked if he had pressed K, and he hadn't. He looked around and noticed the scoreboard being extremely lopsided. Then he saw it. Sweaty tryhards yelling at each other in obscenities and aggressively trying to win a public game. Ben was no longer able to find meme groups or even get out of spawn, so Ben switched sides and tried to observe what was happening. He immediately was met by a player asking Ben about regiments and if he would like to join the KRA. Ben replied confusingly that he had only just gotten the game and didn't know what regiments even were. He politely declined and then tried to play. However, he was quickly shut down by another KRA and told to play seriously, to win. Ben felt a slight sting on his bruised ribs even as they were quickly healing. He was devastated. He had found a game with a community that didn't care about who you were or where you came from, but now he realised it was controlled by the strongest and biggest regiment with a culture he tried so hard to escape from. He hastily turned off his computer and went to bed early that night, forcing him to accept reality that he will never even come close to his lineage's legacy, even through his video game hobby. Tears silently flowed in Ben's dark room that night. Come next morning, Ben tried to find servers that weren't filled with KRA, but it was almost impossible, considering how servers were slowly dying after the summer sale. Ben heavily sighed as he pressed the escape key and tried to leave, but he heard a voice. Ben turned around and saw a player leading half the team toward him. Ben can only watch in awe as the officer commanded, "First Battalion, set up suppressing fire on my line and wait for my command. Delta Force, initiate Delta Force swing to the west and fire at will to the enemy in the north. Wait for my command." Ben didn't even move his mouse. He was watching 40 non-regiment players coordinate their respective positions and waited. That's when Ben noticed the officer looking at him and yelling at him. "First Battalion, what are you doing standing there? Get in the goddamn firing line and help me kill these KRA scum." Ben quickly got into the line and felt something he'd never felt before. He suddenly didn't care about his glasses almost falling off his face or the pain that still resides in his ribs. He fired when the officer said to fire. He watched as the Delta Force moved into a flanking position and poured more deadly fire as the kill feed filled up with KRA deaths. Then Ben noticed the scoreboard and noticed they were actually losing. As he became confused, the officer proclaimed, "First Battalion, fight for glory, not victory. Charge!" Ben watched as not only the 1st Battalion, but Delta Force in the west charged at the same time toward the enemy fortified position. An enemy swivel went off and decimated 8 players. "Keep moving, no fucking fear!" Ben's hand started shaking and sweating on his mouse and keyboard. When he reached the front, the officer was miraculously still alive and fighting the enemy. Suddenly he yelled, "First Battalion, cavalry support!" Cavalry hooves swept past Ben's head from behind as multiple horsemen jumped over the sandbags he had just tripped over and saw them slice the limbs off the enemy players around him as they suddenly fell to a lifeless heap. Ben sat in utter shock as the officer rallied the surviving soldiers. The score was still vastly against them, and the round timer was almost done. Ben readjusted his mouse when he heard the officer call out to him, "Hey, Blind and Bruce 45, on me!" And Ben saw it. The mass KRA on the horizon, charging with lifeless recruits being used in the front lines as pawns, and yet the officer was still talking to him. And as the timer approached 0 and the KRA bayonets inched closer to their position, "First Battalion, hold fast.